Welcome back. We missed 2 weeks, so we're going to go through two Parshas. We had a lovely time away, thank you. But now it's time to get back into Parsha. We missed last week, and now we're in this week, so we missed a week. This is a year. We've got to get through two Parshas. Okay. Yeah. Avrohom went forth last week. Yes. Lech, Lecha. Go for yourself. Yeah. Right. Okay. So, what happened since we were away? Boy, what happened? Let's work backwards. Today is Remembrance Day. We used to call it Armistice Day. Yesterday and the day before was the 86th anniversary of Kristallnacht. Yes. And how is it possible that 86 years after Kristallnacht, on the same night, one night before, Jews were attacked in Amsterdam? Yep. That's quite incredible. I saw a comment. I'll start with this. I saw a comment this morning. Amsterdam confirmed what we always knew. It was never about free Palestine. It's just about dead Jews. That's what it's about. And that all comes about in these three Parshas. This week's, and next week's Parshas, because of what Avrohom Avinu put in place. We met Avrohom at the end of Parshas Noach. The Torah listed out the 10 generations from Noach to Avrohom. And we learn that about Avrohom at the end of Noach, and then we learn that Avroham's father Terach was with him, and Terach died, end of Noach. Come to this week's Parsha, and there's an interesting discussion, which we won't go into now, about the timing of all of it. But Terach actually died after the beginning of this week's Parsha. When you work out how old he was, and when this Parsha started, last week's Parsha started, Lech, Lecha, Avrohom was 75 years old. He had recognized Hashem as a young child. He looked up at the stars and the sun and the moon, and he said, look at this world. Look what's going on. There's something that's right about this place. It's got to have a creator. And he's slowly, over time, recognized, hang on, the world is steeped in idolatry. A person makes an idol, and this says, this is my God, this is who created me. Well, hello, you just carved this wooden statue out or made a pottery thing. And that can't be. There's got to be somebody in control. And he recognized Hashem. And as he got closer and closer to Hashem eventually, did initially connect to him, but he made this incredible connection and relationship with Avrohom Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And comes to the beginning of Lech Lecha, and Hashem says to Avrohom, now it's time to go. He had gone through, and we will discuss, if there's time at the end, the 10 trials of Abraham. These tests that he went through in his life. The Torah doesn't mention most of them. It alludes to them, but one of them is the end of last week's parsha. It talks about Ur-Kasdim, the fiery furnace, this place where there was a fiery furnace. We'll come back to that Linero at the end. But now Hashem says to him at the beginning of Lech Lecha, and what I intend to do today is go through both parshas relatively quickly to paint a picture of Abraham's life. And when I'm saying Avram, it's Avram and Sarai, or Avraham, as he was at the beginning, Avram and Sarai. Their names are changed to Avraham and Sarah, and they're never called Avram and Sarai again. Whereas Yaakov Avinu, Abraham's grandson, name was changed to Yisrael, but he was called Yisrael and Yaakov. Both names were used through the Torah. Avraham became Avraham because he was the father of many nations. So Avram is told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, go, Lech Lecha, go for yourself. And where must he go? Go from your relatives, from your father's house, to the land that I'm going to show you. Hashem doesn't tell him where to go, and off he walks. And he says, I'll make you a great nation, I'm going to bless you, your name will be great, you'll be a blessing. And one of the crucial lines in all of this is, if not the most crucial line, I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you, I will curse. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. And we see that in the world today. There are 3 monotheistic religions. Christianity falls somewhere. Some parts of Christianity are monotheistic, some parts are not. But essentially, they all follow the Abraham credo of life, let's call it that, to some degree. And so those people that realize who the Jewish people are and bless the Jewish people will be blessed themselves. And that's where the whole thing with Noah in last week's Parsha, those people who take on the 7 Noahide laws, realize what's up in the world. They realize how the world actually works. And off Avram goes. Avram and Sarai and Lot and their families and the people that he had already brought along in his movement of identifying, oh, there is one God in the world, go along and leave his father's house, the land of Haran, Ur-Kasdim. They leave from there and they go towards Israel. And he gets to Israel, and the Torah says, with his wealth and that they amassed and the souls that they made in Haran, and off they go. And they get to Canaan. The country is called Canaan because Canaan, son of Noah, well, grandson of Noah, was living there. And the Canaanite nations were already in place in this land. And Avram walks around the whole country. By walking around the land, he takes ownership of it. It's a way of taking ownership of land is by grabbing onto it. And he walks around, but as soon as they get there, there's a famine. And Avram is tested, and he's sent off, and he has to go now to Egypt. And on the way to Egypt, he realizes how beautiful his wife Sarah is. Sarah is the most beautiful woman in the world, and he says, the Egyptians are the lowest of low. Ancient Egyptians were, in some ways, not very dissimilar to what's going on in parts of the world today, in terms of being very depraved. And he figured they were going to kill him and take Sarai. And so therefore he hid her in a box. She was discovered, and they saw her, and he said, and they agreed. He told her, and he said to her, just, you're my sister. Technically, wasn't really wrong. She was his niece, but Ramban for sure, because this happens the second time in this week's Parsha, Ramban for sure says Avram sinned at this point. He shouldn't have done what he did, but he did. Paro and his whole household get some form of sickness. He's afflicted with a severe plague, the Torah calls, or plagues, in the matter of Sarai, the wife of Avram. And Paro gives Avram wealth and kicks him out. And because he realizes how great Avram is, he gives Sarai, his daughter, as a maid. He wanted to take Sarai for himself and marry his daughter off to Avram because he realized Avram is this incredibly great man. So he gives his daughter Hagar to Sarai as a maid. This is a princess of Egypt, and she's suddenly a lowly maidservant. They go back to Israel, and Avram and his nephew Lot, they've amassed this incredible wealth, and he sees Lot's workers allowing the animals to graze in other people's property, and he says, this is not on. You're going to corrupt my people. Let's split ways. And he says to Lot, you know what? You're my nephew. We're family. You choose where you want to go. I'll go somewhere else. You choose. The whole land is before you. And Lot chooses to go and set up amongst the lands of Sodom and Gomorrah, which comes through again in this week's Parsha. Avram is promised again by Hashem that he will be a great man, and he's going to, Hashem says, walk around the length and breadth of this land, and then I'm going to give it to you. And Hashem then moves, and he lives near in Hebron. Then there is what we probably should call the First World War. Didn't happen in 1914, it happened in Avram's time. 4 kings go to battle against 5 kings. And there's this war that goes on for many, many, many years. The bottom line of the war is Lot is captured, because the Sodom and Gomorrah are involved in the war, and Lot is captured. Oig, who we're going to meet much later in the Torah, who is one of the giants, wants to marry Sarah, and he thinks, oh, this is great. I'm going to go and tell Avram that Lot's been captured. Avram will go to battle because Avram's the kind of guy whose family is important to this guy. I'm saying this, I should not be talking about Avram Avinu as a guy. He was as great can be. But this is Oig thinking. He'll get killed in this war because he's only got a few people. He's battling against 4 of the greatest nations in the world, the 4 great nations. And he'll get killed, and I can marry his wife. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. So he comes to tell Avram. Avram obviously goes and tries to rescue Lot. Torah says he went with 318 men. It also says he went with his servant Eliezer. There is an opinion that says the numerical value of the name Eliezer is 318. Avram and Eliezer. Two old men went to, I don't know how old Eliezer was, but Avram was getting on in life, given that he had left Israel at 75. It was sometime between 75 and 86, sometime in that period, a 9 or 11-year period. And we'll come back to 86 in a moment. In a moment. And so Avram goes with 318 men or with just Eliezer, it doesn't matter which, and he goes and defeats these kings. And he gets Lot back, and he has a whole discussion with Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, who is Shem, the son of Noach, who is now the king of Shalem. Yerushalayim comes the era where he was. And Avram gives him 10% as we give Misa, because he took all this thing. And he basically gives everything back to the king of Sodom. And he says, I'm not going to take a thread or a shoe strap from you. It's your stuff. Because the king of Sodom wanted to bargain with him to get the stuff back. Avram said, it's all yours. I won't take a thread or a shoe strap. And because of that, Avram's children were given the mitzvahs of tzitzis and tefillin, a thread and a shoe strap, and straps, leather straps. As a reward, when we put on tefillin, we connect directly to Hashem. When we put on tzitzis and we put on a talis, we enwrap ourselves in all 613 mitzvahs. So they were, let's call it primordial mitzvahs. They were the mitzvahs that make a Jewish person, Jewish man, connect to Hashem. A woman doesn't need those mitzvahs because she's already connected. I think she's connected. Okay, then Avram is reassured by Hashem again, and Hashem goes through and has a covenant with Avram known as the Bris Ban Mesarim, the covenant of the parts where Avram cuts up various animals and walks through them. Hashem shows him the future. And Hashem says, you are going to be the father of many nations. Included in that, he's told that we will go down to a land, we will be enslaved for 400 years, and he's told about the Egyptian exile. The Egyptian exile, just to quickly go there, was only 210 years. And so it seems like Avram's told 400, Hashem took us out after 210. What's going on? It says, but it actually says you'll be a stranger in your land. From the moment of Yitzhak's birth until the exodus from Egypt was 400 years. Because that whole time, even though Yitzhak himself never left Israel, which we'll come to in next week's Parsha and the week after, he was like a stranger in his own land. And so that exile was 400 years from the time of Yitzhak's birth. Okay. The covenant is ratified, and Avram and Sarai is struggling to fall pregnant. There's a halacha that if a couple are married for 10 years, it doesn't often happen today, certainly very rarely today, but they should get divorced and try and find someone else because they might fall pregnant with someone else. It's not a halacha we put onto people, but if people choose to do that, they can. They had been in Israel for 10 years now, and Sarai says to Avram, look, it's not working. I'm not falling pregnant. It's time you, not moved on, but take another wife. And she gives Abraham Hagar, her Egyptian maidservant. Hagar falls pregnant, and she starts mocking Sarai. And so she gets kicked out. And she goes away, and she's crying, and an angel comes to her and says, don't worry. She miscarries. Don't worry, you will conceive, and you will have a child who will become a great nation. She comes back, and she has a child. She's told the child's name will be Ishmael. And it says, Avram ben Shmonim Shana v'Shesh Shanim v'Ledes Hagar es Yishmael Avraham. Avram was 86 years old when Hagar was bore Yishmael to Avram. I heard from Rabbi Gladstein yesterday in a very short shir. It's been 86 years since Kristallnacht. 86 years to the day there was another pogrom in Europe by Yishmael, who was born when Avram was 86 years old. The connections are frightening. Very, very frightening. Okay, so Avram is now 99 years old, and Hashem comes to him. And he comes to him with the name Kael Shakai. We don't say the words properly. It's Aleph Lamed and Shin Daled. But we don't say Hashem's name, so we say Kael Shakai. So he uses that name, which is one of Hashem's names. And he says, I'm going to make a covenant between you and I. You're going to be perfect. It's time to have a bris. The covenant of bris is brought in this week's Parsha. That's the mitzvah of the Parsha. There are very, very few mitzvahs in Sefer Bereshis, because Sefer Bereshis is... Many people look at Sefer Bereshis as stories. We look at Sefer Bereshis as the establishment of the Jewish people. It's a nation being established, and the nation is established through the actions of the forefathers. Maaseh Avos Siman Labanim, they say. The stories of the forefathers are a sign for the children. Spiritual DNA. That's what was going on here. Whatever the forefathers were doing was being put into their children for all time. And so here Avraham has, or he's still Avram, has a child, Yishmael. Yishmael is now 13 years old, and Avram is told, circumcise yourself and your entire household, which Avram does. It was going against everything else. Avram did this for himself. He's told that your name will become Avraham. Hashem says, I'm going to make a covenant. You're going to become Avraham. You're going to be a father of many nations. He is told that his wife Sarai will now be called Sarah. And I'm going to bless her, and she's going to have a son. She's 89 years old at the time. I'll come back to that in this week's Parsha. Okay. Avram laughs. He says, how is it possible that I'm a 99-year-old guy? My wife's an 89-year-old woman. We cannot have children. And Hashem says, nonetheless, your wife Sarah is going to bear a son, and you're going to call his name Yitzchak. Yitzchak coming from he laughed. Or he will laugh. Laughter. He's going to fulfill his covenant through Yitzchak. The spiritual DNA that Avram puts into place comes through Yitzchak, not through Yishmael. Yishmael gets Avram's DNA, gets gifts and other things, and we'll learn in a few weeks' time. Avram has children later on in Parshas Chayei Sarah. They are sent away with gifts. Avraham gives everything to Yitzchak. And when it says everything, it's not only talking about physical things, it's talking about the spiritual things, the blessings firstly from Hashem, the ability to give and receive blessing, and all that spiritual energy that Avraham put in place into the Jewish people's DNA. Similar thing happens with Yitzchak with two children. He had Esav and Yaakov. Everything went through Yaakov. We will discuss that, please God, when we get there. So the Parsha ends, last week's Parsha ends, that Avraham, on that very day, Avraham circumcised his son Yishmael at 13. Hence, the Muslims circumcise at age 13 till this day, most do. And the people of his house, and those that he purchased for money, in other words, all the slaves and everybody that he brought along into his religion, were circumcised with him on that day. Avraham circumcised himself. End of last week's Parsha. Let's start this week's Parsha, and we're only 18 minutes in. We're doing well. Parshas Vayeiro. Vayeiro alav Hashem Eloine Mamre, who Yosef Pesach Oel Kachem Hayom. Hashem appeared to Avraham it doesn't say to Avraham, to him, in the plains of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. There is so much in that one little verse. Avraham's now 3 days after he's given himself a bris. He's a 99-year-old man. He's just had major surgery. It's a traumatic experience. Most people don't remember because we're 8 days old, but most people don't walk or talk for 9, 10, or 12, or 15 months afterwards. So maybe it's traumatic. Right. But
so those who walked early had less trauma.
Yeah, they got over it better. I don't know. Okay, that was the joke of the day. We'll move on. Okay, you remember?
No, I remember the joke.
Oh, okay, not the trauma. Okay, so Avram's 3 days after his bris, they say the third day after an operation is the worst day in terms of recovery. Hashem makes it really, really hot. Not to punish Avraham, because Avraham's tent was open on all 4 sides. so that guests could see it and he'd welcome guests in. And Avram now wants to sit outside his tent so he can welcome people in. Hashem says, no, you're going inside the air-conditioned tent. You need to recover. And Hashem teaches us there the mitzvah b'kecholem. Hashem himself came to visit Avram. But Avram's complaining. He says, I want to help people. I want to be out there and bringing people in and teaching people about you. So Hashem sends 3 people that look like Arabs in the desert. They were angels, but they were dressed up as people, or masquerading as people. They come along, and Avram says to Hashem, now, just picture the scene. Hashem is talking to Avram, he's visiting, and Avram says, sorry, God, but can you just wait here a minute? I've got 3 visitors I need to go and check out. The mitzvah of bringing visitors in. It just shows you how important that mitzvah is. Avram runs out to welcome these people, brings them in, and he says, bring water, wash your feet. Now, he believes they're idol worshippers, so he wants to wash the dust of their idol worship off them outside. Wash your feet and come inside, sit beneath the tree. I'm going to get you some bread and we'll give you some food and then you can go on your way. And he arranges for, he goes to Sarah and he says to make just make a huge feast for these 3 gentlemen. He goes and shechts 3 calves, not 1, but 3, because he wants to give them tongue. Tongue is the most delicious delicacy. Tongue in mustard was invented at this point in time. And the issue with the tongue is the tongue. Why a tongue of a calf is a pretty big thing. It can sustain 3 people quite easily. But Avram figures this is his level of achnasas achim, of bringing in guests. He figures the tongue's got 3 parts. There's the back, which is a little bit fatty. There's the middle, which is a little, kind of not so fatty, but not. And there's a pointy end, which is a little bit tough, maybe. Each person, all 3 of them might want the middle, or might want the front, or might want the back. I've got to give enough for each of them that they can have what they want. It's not like the chicken only came with 2 pulkas.
We all like brown.
Well, some like brown, some like white. Thankfully. Yeah, somebody's going to invent a chicken with 16 legs. But Hashem made the chicken with brown and white and legs and wings and whatever else so that everybody can be happy. And that's what Avram was doing here. He was making sure everyone happy. So he brings them their meal. They sit beneath the tree and they tell him, and they say to him, Avram, where's Sarah, your wife? He says, well, she's in the tent. That's where, at the time, the woman needed to be away from the men's party. That was what went on at the time. And so they say, okay, well, this time next year, we're going to be back, one of them says, because each angel has 1 mission. I'm going to be back next year, and you're going to have a son. Sarah is going to have a son. And Sarah overhears this conversation inside, and she laughs within herself, it says, at this fact. She says, I'm an old woman. I've withered away. In fact, Sarah never ever had a womb. She was completely unable to have children. And Hashem, at this point in time, re-energized her. He almost recreated her. And suddenly, she had a period. She had a womb, a period. She just became a young woman again. And she, like it says, she denied laughing because Hashem comes to her and says, why did your wife laugh? And she denied laughing because she was scared. She didn't know what was going on because suddenly she's like young again. And this is really very odd. So the men looked towards Sodom and they left. And then Hashem says, look, Sodom and the towns around it have become completely off the derech. Yes, let's use that term. They become completely immoral. And we need to destroy these towns. So Hashem says, but Avram and I have got a relationship. If I just destroy these towns, Avram's not going to understand what's going on. I need to ask to inform him what I'm doing. So Hashem comes to Avram and he says, because there's this outcry going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, their sin is very grave. I'm going down there and I'm going to destroy the town. I just want to let you know. So Avram says to Hashem, what if there are 50 righteous men there? Now, there were 5 towns. So the question is, was he saying if there's 50 righteous men in all 5 towns, or maybe in one town, or 10 in each town? Either way, Avroham's saying, are there 50 righteous men in that area? And Hashem says, for the sake of 50, I won't destroy those towns. If there's 50 righteous people, they deserve to live. So Avram says, okay, well, I'm going to have a little bit of a bargaining game with you now, Hashem. What if there's 45? So if there's 9 righteous people in each of the towns, each of those 5 towns, you come along, you can be in each town, be the minion, Hashem. So what if there's 45 righteous? Hashem says, no, there's 45, I won't destroy the towns. So Avram then says, okay, I'm a pretty good wicket. He doesn't actually say 45, by the way. He says there's 50 less 5. They're lacking 5. Then he says, okay, well, what about if there's only 40 there? Hashem says, no, for 40 I won't. He says, what about 30? He says, please don't be angry, Hashem. I'm just trying to work out how far this is going to get, where you're going to go. So he says, for 30, if I find 30 righteous people, I won't destroy the town. So Avram says, we're going well here. What about 20? Because Avram knows he can bring people around. He's had such success in the past. He knows if he's got something to work with, perhaps he can bring these towns around and elevate them. So Hashem says, no, if there's 20, I won't. So he says, please Hashem, don't be angry if I speak just one more time. What if there's 10 people there? And Hashem says, I will not destroy the towns if there's 10 people across all 5 towns. And Avram said, that's it. I can't go lower than that. If there's not 10 people, Hashem, these people have lost it completely and the towns need to be destroyed. So Hashem goes, departs from Avram, finished speaking, and Avram went back to his place. 2 of the angels, now the first angel now goes because he's done his job. The next 2 come to Sidon and they come into this town. And this place, Lot was there. Remember, Lot was there. This place is completely depraved. The justice of the area was, if a person wants money, we can't give it to him. We might have to, if he's tall, we might have to shrink him, chop off his feet. If he's short, we're going to stretch him. Everything that normal people would do, they did the exact opposite. And so they come to the town. Lot is in a position where they've made him the judge. And he said, in those days, in later times, you see it as well. The judge, the court, the Beis Din sat at the gate of the town. We see it in Megillas Rus when Boaz goes to Ploni Almoni and tries to work out whether Rus should marry him or Ploni Almoni. So Lot is sitting at the gate. These people come in. They do not want visitors in this town. In fact, anybody who brings a visitor into their house is subject to death. So Lot sees them, but Lot is still very influenced from living with Avram for so many years. And so Lot brings them into his home quickly. Remember that Abraham had told them, wash your feet outside and then come in. Lot brings them in and says, wash your feet inside, because he was so scared that they would be killed. He would be killed for bringing them in. He brings them in, and they said, no, don't worry, we're going to sleep in the square. And he says, listen, this place is not exactly a good place. You want to sleep in the square, they're going to attack you and kill you. So he says, rather come to me. And he urges them so much, they come to his house, and he bakes them matzahs. It was Pesach. We know there was Pesach at this point in time. So Lot, therefore, was at a level. Now, remember, Pesach is only 400 years later. But the Avos, and obviously Lot was kind of approaching that level of understanding, knew that on the 14th of Nisan, the spiritual forces in the world meant you brought a Korban Pesach. And on the night of the 15th, you ate matzahs. Clearly, they knew this. They were able to tap into that spiritual energy of the day. Hashem brought Pesach on the 15th of Nisan because of the spiritual energy embedded in that day. And every other Yom Tov works exactly the same. We have reasons for the Yom Tov. So the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 festivals, are all about agriculture. But they're also about various mitzvahs. They're also about Pesach is redemption from Egypt, and Shavuos is about receiving the Torah and Sukkot is about dwelling outside in huts and bringing the species and bringing in the harvest and everything else. But at that point in time, on those specific days, the spiritual energy is there for those mitzvahs. The spiritual energy was put in the world first. So they come in, and these sodomites then converge on Lot's house en masse, and they're banging down the door. And they call to Lot, and they say, "Where are these men that came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may sodomize them." That's where the word sodomy comes from. Sodomizing, we want to know these men. So Lot went to the entrance, and he shut the door behind him, and he said, "Look, I beg you, don't be wicked." Now, Art Scroll's got a lovely little note on the side. You know, they give the little headings. Lot, a perplexing hero. Because this is what he does. He says, "My brothers, don't be wicked. Please, I've got 2 daughters. They've never been with a man before. You can have them. I'm going to bring them out to you. You can do whatever you like with my daughters. Just leave these visitors alone." Very lopsided. He's trying to do the right thing, but in a very, very lopsided manner. Do with them as you please, talking about his daughters. But to these men, do nothing. They've come to shelter under my roof. They said, "Stand back. Just get out the way. You now have come to sojourn with us, and you want to be the judge and take over this place. We know we've appointed you, but they're like, come on, you've just been appointed judge here. Don't think you run the place. We'll treat you worse than ever." So they pressed against Lot, and the angels pull him into the house, and they try and break down the door, and the angels blind them, and the whole story of that, these people just kind of start attacking each other because they don't want what's going on. Bring Lot in, close the door, and say to Lot, "Right, we're here to get you out of here. We're going to take you, your family, your daughters, your sons-in-law. Sons-in-law, he sends for them. They want to have nothing to do with it. They want to stay." At the end of the day, they're told, "Get out." And the angels take them out, Lot, his wife, and his 2 unmarried daughters, and off they go. They're told, "Don't look back." And the famous story of his wife looking back, and she's turned into a pillar of salt as the sulfur takes off the city. Lot goes to a nearby town called Zohar, and he dwells there for a short while, and then he realized, no, this is all over the show. This valley is all over, and he goes into a cave in a mountain, and he hides out. And they look upon this world that they can see in front of them, and there's just complete, utter destruction. And his daughters have a discussion, and the older one says to the younger one, "We are all that's left in this world. You, me, and Dad. We need to continue the human race." So they get him drunk, and the older daughter sleeps with him that night, doesn't know what's going on, and she conceives and has a child which she calls Ammon, from my father, my nation, from my nation, from my father. And she says to her sister the second night, "Your turn," and get him drunk again, and she falls pregnant, have a child called Moab, from my father. A little bit more subtle, but of those people, Moab, I spoke about Rus Hamoaviyah. She was a Moabite. King David was a great-grandson of Ruth. King David's great, etc. grandfather was Lot, from this incestuous relationship with his daughter. The seeds of David HaMelech, and we will learn about the other side of David from his father's side, from Yehuda, in a few weeks' time. Both sides of King David's lineage and ancestry were tainted. And it just shows us every single one of us has the ability to become extremely great. Okay, so then we jump back to, so that's the end of the story of Lot. And we come back and we meet Ammon and Moab various times through the Torah. Avram then goes south to the land of Gerar, the land of the Pelishtim. Don't let anybody fool you and tell you that the Palestinians are the Pelishtim. The Pelishtim were more likely than not, a Greek nation from probably Cyprus or one of the Greek islands that had come to the land of Canaan and lived on the coast where Gaza is today, and a little bit north of that, up to Ashdod probably, that area with the Pelishtim, the Philistines. They were warrior people. Their capital was Gerar, and Avram comes to them. And again, this time he doesn't tell Sarah what he's going to do. But he says, she's my sister. And the king of the Pelishtim, Avimelech, in Gerar, takes her and wants to marry her because she's the most beautiful woman. Now remember, she's looking significantly younger and more beautiful. And him and his entire family and his palace and his people all suddenly get complete blockage of everything in their body. They get this terrible, terrible pains and suffering. And he has a dream. And through the dream, Hashem says, you've taken this man's wife. It says there also that he didn't touch her. So Sarah was completely untouched. He gets upset with Avraham because Avraham had lied. But Avraham says, well, technically she is my sister because she's my niece. And he gets her back. They don't leave there straight away. Avimelech and Avraham, he returns Sarah to Avraham and gives him flocks and cattle and maidservants and maids, and they enter into a treaty. And Sarah is now pregnant. And this is the Rosh Hashanah laning that we come to now. By Hashem pakad es Sarah. Hashem remembered Sarah. And he did as he had spoken. She conceived and she bore a son to Avram in his old age at the time that Hashem had spoken. 1 year afterwards, he said, next year I'm going to come back, said the angel, and you're going to have a son. And Avram called the name of his son Yitzchak, as he had been told already by the angel, by Hashem. He circumcised Yitzchak on the 8th day, because in last week's Parsha in Lecha, Hashem said, future generations you will circumcise on the 8th day. And Sarah said, Hashem has made laughter for me, and whoever hears will laugh for me. She was now extremely, extremely happy. And Avram says, who is the one who said to Avram, Sarah would nurse children? I've born a son in his old age. It was obviously an incredible, joyful occasion. Here we have the next forefather of the Jewish people. The Torah then jumps and goes back to our friend Hagar and her son Ishmael, Abraham's son, with the concubine. And Hagar, the Egyptian, who had this child, Ishmael, starts mocking Sarah. And Sarah gets upset. And Sarah says, we need to drive out the slave woman and her son because I've got Yitzhak. She's going to contest, and there's going to be a major, major dispute between Yitzhak and Ishmael, and we need to get rid of them. And Avram's very, very upset about this. He says, he's my son, and I need to treat him as a son. Yes, Yitzhak is my predominant son. He's going to inherit the blessings and everything else, but Ishmael is still my son. Hashem says, no, listen to your wife. Message for married men. Absolutely. I'm talking about me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Avram got up early in the morning. He gave Hagar a credit card and an account to check into booking.com or whatever. He gave her a skin of water and a loaf of bread and some bread, or bag of bread, and sent them off their way into the desert at Beersheba. When the water was consumed and the bread was finished, she sent the boy away. Now, Ishmael was born when Avram was 86. Yitzhak was born when he was 90. So with 14 year gap between them. So it's sometime after this. So Ishmael is a young teenager, or a teenager more likely than not. It's sometime between Yitzhak being born and Yitzhak's 37th birthday, sometime in that period. So Ishmael is a young adult. So the Torah says, when the water in the skin was consumed, she cast off the boy beneath one of the trees. She went and sat herself down at a distance, some bow shots away, because she said, I don't want to see the death of the child. Human shield, maybe. You're worried about herself, not really. There's kind of a few ways we can read this, but she's putting in place the ability to not protect children, but to put children out there that anything can happen to them. Anything could happen Just think about what's happened recently in the last 400 plus days with human shields and mothers being very happy when their children are killed because whatever they think. Not getting too political yet. We've still got time. We've got time. Okay. Well, I said we're going backwards, and we've really only went backwards 2 days. We've got about 2 weeks to go backwards still. Okay. So Hashem heard her cry. She did cry, and Hashem heard her cry. And he said, "What troubles you, Hagar? Don't worry, because I hear the cry of the youth." This is what I was looking for before we started. Hashem says, Al tira ki shama Elokim es kol hana'ar. I've heard the cry. I've heard your troubles. Don't fear, because ba'asher hu sham. I'm looking at this boy as he currently is, in his present state. I know one day he's going to torment my people. One day Ishmael's children are going to be most evil, destructive, awful people in the entire world, both to their own people and to others, and especially to Yitzchak's descendants. I'm saying Yitzchak's descendants as opposed to only Yaakov's descendants, because they've been terrible to both Esav and to Yaakov, more recently to us. But even so, I mean, the way they've gone through Europe and attacked people in Europe. I saw a video this morning about how many people are stabbed on a daily basis by Yishmael's descendants. So Hashem said, Ba'asher hu sham, as he is currently now. Right now, he's not a bad person. And I'm judging a person as they are right now, because everybody's got the opportunity to do tshuva later on. Everybody can come back. And right now, he's okay. Hashem doesn't look at a person and say, one day you're going to be a whatever, terrible person, therefore I'm going to judge you now. No, you've got the opportunity not, because we have that. Every single person has that free will to do the right thing. So as he was right now, he was able to be helped. Okay. I'm going to make a great nation of him, says Hashem. Hashem opened her eyes and she perceived a well, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the youth to drink. And he grew up and he dwelt in the desert and he became an accomplished archer and he lived in the deserts of Paran. Now, who was this Ishmael? He was born in last week's Parsha. And in last week's Parsha, when he is born, it says of him, and I kind of skimmed over this partially intentionally, but I should have said it when I saw it because I need to find it inside. I'm sorry. Here we go. When Avram had kicked Hagar out the house, Sarah had kicked Hagar out the house the first time when she was pregnant and she had conceived and miscarried that baby. The angel of Hashem comes to her and he says, I'm going to bless you with a child. Let's just read the passage. Vayeiro said to Malach of Hashem said to her, Hinach hara v'yoladet bein v'kara shemo Yishmael. Behold, you're going to conceive and you're going to give birth to a son. You can call his name Yishmael. Yishmael. Hashem listens. Ki shama Hashem el enach el anyech. Because Hashem has heard your prayer. For who he year will be Pera Adam, a wild ass of a man. He's a wild ass who happens to be a man. Think about how those people behave in the world today. Not like animals are good things. A wild ass is not a normal animal. It's wild. It's not tameable. It's a wild ass who happens to be a man. And there's a big message in all of that. We started off by talking about them wanting to kill Jews and free Palestine, and their phrase is from the river to the sea. In last week's Parsha, and I include this in a Parsha sheet that I wrote, that Avram was promised the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River, from river to river. It's a much bigger area than the river to the sea. They don't know which river and they don't know which sea. But Avram, at the end of times, was promised 10 nations. We got 7 when we came back with Yeshua into Eretz Israel, when it became Eretz Israel. We're still going to get another 3 nations in that region, from Egypt to the Euphrates River. Think about that area. That is the land of Israel in the time of Mashiach. And nobody will dispute it. Okay, we come to the final part of this week's Parsha, which is something that is included in the Siddur every single day. Most people don't read it. It's right at the beginning of the Siddur. But it's something that's said by many people every single day. It's the laying of Rosh Hashanah. It is the only time in the Torah that Hashem says, "Vahi achar hadavrim ha'eleh," after these things, "Vahalokim nisa es Abraham." Hashem tested Abraham. Hashem came to test Abraham. I said at the beginning that Abraham had 10 tests. This one, it says Hashem tested Abraham. The others are alluded to, they hinted at. This one is the test. What is the test? Vayomer elav Abraham, vayomer hinenu. Hashem says, Abraham, he says, here I am. It's Vayomer, he said, Kachna es bincha, take your son. Na, meaning please take your son. Es yichidcha, your only one. Asher ahavta, the one that you love. Es Yitzchak. Lech Lecha, and go, Lech Lecha again. The same Lech Lecha that we had in the beginning of last week's Parsha, the name of last week's Parsha. El Eretz HaMoriah, to the land of Moriah, what we call today the Temple Mount. V'halehu Sham, and Le'ola, and bring him up there as an offering. Al Achad Harim Asher Ama Alecha, on one of the mountains that I'm going to tell you. So Hashem says, take your son. So Abram says, Hashem, I've got 2 sons. I've got Ishmael and I've got Yitzhak. He says, you're only one. He says, yeah, they're both only ones, because one's the only one from Hagar and one's the only one from Sarah. I've got 2 only sons. Hashem says, the one you love. No, but I love both of them. Now, obviously, at this point in time, Ishmael has come back, and we'll see in a minute where he's brought in here. The one that you love. He says, no, but I love them both. They're both my sons. Hashem says, Yitzchak, take Yitzchak, and bring him as a sacrifice. Avraham pleaded with the world. He was known as Avram HaIvri. The Ivri, Hebrew, meaning he came from the other side, because he was the other side of everyone in the world. They practiced child sacrifice. It was common. We see it in Greek mythology all the time. They left children out on the mountain. We see it in all these practices that there was child sacrifice. Avram begged and pleaded with the world, don't do these things. Hashem doesn't want this. Hashem comes along and says, I'm going to do it to you, and see how strong you are in your faith. You've pushed this so much that we need to see how strong you are. So Hashem's told me to do something. He says, Avram, I've got to do it. So what does he do? Vayashkem Avram bavaker. Avram woke up early in the morning. We learn from this that Avram davened Shachris. We need to daven Shachris early in the morning. Vayachavesh es chamoroi, and he saddled his own donkey. He had hundreds of servants, but he himself saddled his donkey. He's now doing a mitzvah. When you do a mitzvah, you do it yourself. It's, you don't ask other people to do it for you. You do things for yourself. If people want to help you, that's them doing a chesed for you. But you got a mitzvah to do it. Eshnei na'arav ito, and he took his 2 young men with him. Who were these 2 young men? His servant Eliezer and his son Ishmael. Ve'es Yitzchak b'noi, and his son Yitzchak. V'vaka atzai ola, and he took split wood for the offering. V'yakam v'yalech el hamakom asher amar lo halakim, and stood up and went to the place where Hashem had spoken to, from the place where Hashem spoke to him from. So he went from that place. On the 3rd day, he lifts up his eyes and he sees something in the distance. On one of the mountains, he sees something. And he turns to Eliezer and he says, can you see something over there? And Eliezer says, yeah, there's a few mountains. And he turns to Ishmael, can you see anything? Yeah, a few mountains. Turns to Yitzchak, he says, yeah, there's something on that mountain. Let's go. Hashem's presence on the mountain. They could sense, they could feel and see Hashem's presence. And they go. and the Satan puts obstacles in their way and tries to drown them, and they eventually get to Har Moriah. This is all brought in Chazal and the Midrash and the Gemara. He tells them, stay with the donkey and we'll go. So off they go. Yitzchak says to him, I'll just say it in English. He says, Father, and he says, here I am. Same words that Hashem said. And he replied, Hashem called Avraham, and he says, Hineni. Yitzchak says, Hineni. He says, I can see the fire in the wood. Where's the lamb? Yitzchak suddenly cottoning on. There's something going on here. Avraham said, don't worry, Hashem will bring the lamb, seek out the lamb for the offering. Don't worry. Hinting, you are the lamb. And the two of them went yachtav. They went as one. They went together. They arrived at the place which Hashem spoke. Avram built an altar, arranged the wood. He bound Yitzchak, his son. He placed him on the altar. Yitzchak is 37 years old. Avram is 137. And in other words, Yitzchak knew exactly what was going on. And he knew that this was what Hashem had told Avram to do. Avram is about to offer Yitzchak up as an offering. He's holding the knife. There are opinions that Yitzchak's neshama left him. And I'll come back to that in a minute where we see that. And an angel suddenly calls out to him and says, Avram, Avram. And he says, Hineni. He says, don't touch it. Don't stretch out your hand against the boy. And most people hold that he didn't actually do anything to him. I know that you're a God-fearing man. Now, this is the test. You've just passed the ultimate test. You've withheld your son, your only one, from me. Avram looked up and Hine, behold. Whenever the Torah says Hine, it means behold. Something happened. There's something. What's that? Oh, there's a ram caught in the thicket. And he takes the ram and he offers the ram up to Hashem. And he calls the place Hashem Yireh. Hashem is feared. Yerushalayim. That's a mixture of Shalem and Hashem Yireh. The angel comes to Hashem a second time and he said, because the word of Hashem has done this thing, you've not withheld your son, your only one. I will surely bless you and greatly increase your offspring like the stars of the heaven, like the sand of the seashore. Your offspring inherited the gate of its enemy. Nations of earth shall bless themselves, and by your offspring, because of you've listened to my voice. Avram is now blessed completely. He's got through 10 incredibly difficult challenges, tests in life, and he's passed, and he is completely connected with Hashem as one. The Torah then, Avram returns to his young men, to Eliezer and Ishmael, and they stood up and went together to Beersheba, and Avram stays in Beersheba. And the Torah ends with 4 verses. It came to pass after these things that Avram was told that Milcah also had children to Nahor, your brother, and it lists Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Yachzor, Pildash, etc., and Besuel. Besuel bore Rivka. Those 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Avram's brother, and his concubine, whose name was Reuma, and also bore children Teba, Gaham, Hash, and Macha. Names that we don't encounter ever again, except we meet Besuel again and Rivka. Hashem put in place at that very point in time, at the Akedah, the birth of Yitzchak. Yitzchak was 37, Rivka was born. That's where opinions bring, okay, so Yitzchak was given a new neshama at this point in time, so he was born at the same time as Rivka. Not everybody holds that, but it's just an interesting way of understanding the connection between the two. But Hashem always puts in place, we say, puts the refuah before the makkah. He puts in place the healing before he gives a person the patch or whatever it might be. Anything that a person sees as negative, there's always the outcome, the positive outcome is always there in place before anything happens. So we've just met Avraham, Yitzchak, Sarah, Yishmael. Next week's Parsha, Chayei Sarah, goes through the continuation of the story and the continuation of how Avram and Sarah now become Yitzchak and Rivka and their journey. And so we kind of leave Avraham near the beginning of next week's Parsha, essentially, and we start dealing with Yitzchak because we need to meet all the Avos, because each of the 3 Avos and their wives were their main attribute in life were slightly different. They all had incredible, incredible attributes. But Avraham's midah of chesed, his ability to shine forth with kindness, with hachnasas ochim, with bringing guests, as we saw at the beginning of the Parsha, was beyond anything else in the world. And he put that in place for all of us. But he also suffered through 10 tests. How do we know Avraham suffered through 10 tests? Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Asara nisim na'asu sorry, that's the wrong one. That's 10 miracles are performed for our ancestors in the Holy Land. I just saw Asara and I started reading. I'm 3 Mishnahs ahead. 4 Mishnahs ahead. The 4th Mishnah. I'm very much ahead of myself. Okay, so the 5th chapter of Pirkei Avos, just quickly start. Pirkei Avos, the beginning of the first Mishnahs, lots of Mishnahs talk about numbers. It starts with 10, then it jumps to 7, and then to 4, and we've discussed these previously, and then 7, and then 3. I'm just going into 4 periods of the year. So we're talking about 4 character types in people, 4 types of temperament, 4 types of students, 4 types of donors to tzedakah, 4 people in the study hall, etc., etc. 18 or so Mishnahs about numbers of things. So the chapter starts with Hashem created the world with 10 utterances, and from memory we discussed that last year in Parshiyos. Then it says there were 10 generations from Adam to Noach, which we discussed last year. Then there were 10 generations from Noach to Avraham, to show the degree of Hashem's patience, the Mishnah says, because all those generations angered him increasingly until Avram Avinu came along and received the reward for all of them. Then Mishnah Dalet. Asara nisyonas nisnasa Avraham Avinu v'amad b'chulam. Our forefather Avraham was tested with 10 tests or trials, and he withstood all of them. Why? L'hodia kama chibasoi shel Avraham Avinu, to show the degree that Avraham loved Hashem. Avraham loved Hashem so much, Hashem wanted to test him to put in place the ability for the Jewish people, Avraham's descendants, to go through tests in life. Every one of us goes through many, many tests in life. We go through these tests all the time. In fact, daily. Some of them are very small, some of them are very large. But Avraham had these 10 tests. The Mishnah doesn't tell you what they are. The Mishnah just lists the fact that, or just identifies that he went through 10 tests. So various different authorities through the years, earlier and later on, listed out what the 10 trials that Avraham went through. So I'm going to start in Avos de Renosan. Avos de Renosan is written at the time of the Mishnah, about 2,000 years ago, 1,800 years ago. And so it's a midrashic type source. And this is a commentary on Pirkei Avos. And so he brings here in chapter 33, number 2, Esa nisyonas nisnasa Avram Avinu lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our forefather Avram was tested 10 trials before Hashem. V'chulan nimtza shalem. In all of them he was found to be shalem, complete, whole. He was perfect, let's put it that way. The word shalom comes from that. It's just seeing in the note here, it says, not only did Avram withstand all his tests that God placed before him, he also never asked why he was being subjected to these difficulties, demonstrating that his love towards Hashem was wholehearted. The Elohen, and these are them, and it lists them in an interesting way. It says, Shnayim b'Lech Lecha. There were 2 in Parshas Lech Lecha. Shnayim b'Shnei Bonav, 2 with regard to his 2 sons, Ishmael and Yitzhak. Shnayim b'Shnei Nashav, 2 with regard to his 2 wives. Echad im hamalachim, 1 with the war of the 4 kings, we learned about before. Echad bein habesarim, 1 at the covenant of the parts, we had to go through and put into this deep sleep and was cut up the animals and had this spiritual, prophetic discussion with Hashem. Echad be'ur kastim, 1 in ur kastim, which I alluded to at the beginning in 2 weeks ago's parsha. At the end of the parsha, it says he was in ur kastim. Very, very briefly, his father was the chief idol maker of Nimrod, the king. And Avram was one day put in charge, it says in the Midrash, of his father's idol shop. And Avram was realizing, hang on, these things are being made by my father and they're being sold to people as gods. So he smashed up a few of them. And he put a loaf of bread and a big stick in the hands of one of the biggest idols, the statue. His father comes back and he says, what happened here? What did you do? He said, I didn't do anything. That big idol over there grabbed the stick. He wanted the food of the other idols, so he split them all up. So his father said to him, come on, you know these idols, I make them, they're nonsense. He said, but why do you believe in them? And his father went and, let's use the Australian term, dobbed him in to Nimrod. Nimrod was this tyrant of a king. Nimrod threw Avram into a fiery furnace. One of the tests that Avram went through. Avram survived. Avram's brother Haran is sitting on the sidelines and he's looking. He says, I'm not sure which side to be on. If Avram doesn't survive, then I'm going to be killed. If Avram survives and I say I'm on Nimrod's side, and he's standing there weighing up the odds, suddenly when Brother Abe walks out, and he jumps on, I'm on Avram's side. So Nimrod says, hey, you get in the fire yourself. And Haran is burnt. So that's Ur custom. The Echad b'bris milah, one for his giving himself a bris milah. V'chol kach lama, why did Hashem test Avram so much? So that, I'll just read in English, so that when our forefather Avraham would come to take his reward for all his loyalty to Hashem, the angels would say, indeed more than any of us or anyone else, Avraham, our forefather, is worthy of accepting the reward. Avraham would then be able to enjoy his reward without any objection. So, because as it's stated, go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a glad heart. For Hashem has already approved your deeds. It's a pasuk in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, in Kohelet. Corresponding to the 10 trials with which our forefather Abraham was tested, in all of which he was found to be whole, corresponding to all of them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu performed 10 miracles for our descendants in Egypt. That's the next Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. And he brought 10 plagues on the Egyptians. And corresponding to these 10 trials, 10 miracles were performed for the Jewish people at the sea when we crossed Yam Suf. Corresponding to them, he brought 10 blows on the Egyptians at the sea. And Avos to Rabbi Nosson goes through that further on. We'll leave Avos to Rabbi Nosson there. Comes along the Rishonim, the rabbis of around 1,000 years ago or so. And they discuss the 10 trials of Abraham. And Rashi comes and he says, okay, these are the 10 trials of Abraham. Avram hid underground for 13 years from King Nimrod who wanted to kill him. We discussed Nimrod. Nimrod flung Avram into a burning furnace. We discussed that. Avram was commanded to leave his family home and homeland. Leave his family and homeland, beginning of Lech. Almost as soon as he arrived in Canaan, he was forced to leave to escape a famine. This week's Parsha when he went to Egypt. Sarah was kidnapped by Paro's officials. Last week's Parsha were those two. The kings captured Lech, and Avram was forced to go to war to rescue him. The First World War, the War of 4 and 5 kings. Hashem told Avram that his offspring would suffer under 4 monarchies. So I mentioned that in the Brisbane Besarim, Hashem told Avram that his children are going to be down in Egypt for 400 years. At that time also, I left it out, but there will be 4 kingdoms that we will be exiled under. At an advanced age, he was commanded to circumcise himself and his son. He was commanded to drive away Ishmael and Hagar, and he was commanded to sacrifice Isaac, which was the 10th test. Rambam brings slightly different ones. I won't go through all of Rambam's now. They're very, very similar. There's a couple of minor differences, but following very much the same theme. How is it possible that Jewish people can walk into a gas chamber or go on a death march and sing Animamim, I believe with perfect faith? How is it possible that people who are attacked at Nova just over a year ago and maimed and raped, and they are called survivors? Other people would be called victims. The Jewish people are survivors. Avram Avinu and Sarah Imenu and the other Avos and Emos put that into our DNA. They gave us that ability to keep going. Because what happens after every time we're attacked? We rebuild. We don't come along and have refugee camps. How many refugee camps were there in Gaza? In Shomron, what they call the West Bank. These people have been there since 19 whatever. They've been in these places since 1948. We came to Israel in the late 1800s and we built. And we turned Israel around from swampland and desert into the most fertile valleys in the world, the most fertile regions in the world, most incredible fruit and flowers and everything else. And those people who want to be our enemies, we don't want to be their enemies. We want peace. But those people who want to be our enemies just want to destroy. We gave them Gush Katif. We walked away from Gush Katif 20 odd years ago. They destroyed everything that was built there. The agricultural technology in that area was world first stuff, and they destroyed it. I did see a photo this morning of soldiers eating mangoes from some of the mango trees that were still there from the Tsarim. They said they were delicious. That's all based on a prophecy that when the Jewish people are in the land of Israel will be fertile and will flourish.
But against all odds.
Against all the time. But we are survivors. We rebuild. We come back and we come back and we come back. So let's go back over the last few weeks because we do need to discuss just a few things. Okay. So we started off by talking about Kristallnacht the last few days, what happened in Amsterdam, an absolute disgrace. The perpetrators should be arrested and thrown in jail. In fact, they should be sent back to where they came from with all their millions of other troublemakers that are there. Not all Arabs are troublemakers. We do need to understand that. There, unfortunately, is a significant minority that want Sharia law imposed on everybody. Yeah. No, I'm saying a significant minority of that want the problems. It is inbuilt into their DNA. Because we were told that Ishmael is a Pera Adam, a wild ass of a man. And we need to understand that. The only way we're going to survive is by being biyachad, by one, by being connected to Hashem and be connected to one Jewish people. We have differences, but we need to sort out our differences internally. A year ago, we were sorting them out very much externally. That should have been the end, but I didn't want to go back still. We saw the most incredible American election. And it's, the fact that Trump was indicted, charged, found guilty of felonies, and they still preferred him, and not only preferred him, gave him an incredible, overwhelming mandate. It's unbelievable. So I did hear something this morning. I don't know who I heard it from. I heard a very quick video. And I don't want to read too much into this because I'll explain now. But as far as I remember, and I didn't check this up, I normally check these things. I didn't have time to check it. But the gematria, I think, of Donald Trump, however you must know, is the same as Mashiach ben David. That's not saying Trump is Mashiach because he cannot be Mashiach, because Mashiach has to be Jewish son of King David. That line straight from King David. He doesn't think he's Mashiach. No. He doesn't think he's Mashiach. He could be the person who will help us bring Mashiach. And the way I listened to this thing at double speed this morning, and I don't know who the rabbi was, and I need to give credit to where it comes from, but he basically said in 2016 and in 2024, Parshiyos Lecha was this week, where we were told, go forth, go to your land. In 2020, it was not Parshiyos Lecha that year. So there's reasons why he missed out. There's reasons why he's only the second American president ever to have a term skip and come back. From a political perspective, it actually makes me very happy that the woke press are imploding on themselves. I watched quite a bit of YouTube yesterday to see what's going on. You watch these mainstream MSDNC, I think they call MSNBC is now called MSDNC because the Democratic National Convention. It's very much connected to it. You watch this mainstream press and they are attacking each other because they don't know what went wrong. They can't handle it. It's just beautiful to watch. I'm sorry that my political views are coming into a share, but it needs to. The way, I don't know who said this, but I heard it said beautifully. Biden was put in place for whatever reason Hashem wanted him. This wasn't said. This was by a commentator. I'm just saying this. Hashem gives us the leadership in the world. Hashem gives us everything. This election was won because Hashem wanted it to happen. And it was orchestrated by the woke left themselves. If you think about the process, Biden was the nominee. Yes, he beat Trump, but probably COVID was the main thing that pushed it towards him. His presidency was an absolute disaster on every single level you look at it. Inflation, the border, everything, the wars that are going on, just Afghanistan, Iran, absolutely. And so he's coming along and now needs to choose his running mate. And the wise man Biden, who probably already had whatever he's got in 2016, said, I have to have a woman running mate, because he was bowing to the woke left. No, you have to have the best running mate you can find, not a woman. The best person you can find, whether it's a man or woman, does not matter. And he said he had to have a woman. Then came along the murder of George Floyd, a tragedy. And so suddenly he now had to have a woman, because he already had one, of color, to appease the Black Lives Movement. And so suddenly he had to pick somebody, and along came this woman who, from what I understand, was appointed at a junior DA level and had an affair with the most senior person, the head of the department or somebody, who was 40 years older than her, and that's how she got to the top. Now, I don't want to disparage people like that. That's what I hear. Okay. She had zero qualifications. The whole plan all along was to get rid of Biden. They did it very late in the piece because they knew she would get 0 votes at the electoral college. So they waited and waited. Now they implode and say, oh, they should have done it earlier and he should never. Yeah, whatever the case. I heard a commentary this morning that he needs to step down for the last 30 days to give her a chance to be president, so they can say they had the first black woman president.
And behind it all is a Muslim called Obama.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't want to.
The first time after 4 presidents, he won't have a figure in the past.
That's correct.
Well,
look, his middle name is Hussein, but I don't know anything much more about him. All I know is that I saw this morning that Jared Kushner is involved in advising Trump again.
Possibly be
And-
Israeli affairs.
And so he was responsible for the Abraham Accords. And what we need to look for is, firstly, I assume you heard the news. It was not very well publicized yesterday that Qatar has stepped out of the negotiations and have kicked out Hamas. Whether they actually will or not, I don't know, but so be it.
The media are saying that United States interfered.
told
No
them.
way would Biden have
No,
interfered.
Trump's interfered, of course. Yeah, he's putting. I've seen a few things that he's already doing. Yeah, no, he's already putting in place. And Bibi has spoken to him 3 times already. Okay, so let's end the shir by saying that all we can do is follow what Avrohom Avinu showed us. That is, we need to connect to Hashem. We need to be united. We need to be one people. We need to, like Avram did, took his son, his only son, his son he loved. We are all Hashem's only child. The Jewish people are Hashem's firstborn, and we need to behave that way. And if we do, Hashem will bring Mashiach speedily in our time.